Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commander of this deck is Yawgmoth, Thran Physician. He is 2 black for a 2/4 legendary creature human cleric. He has protection from humans, as well as pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature to put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and draw a card. It also has black, discard a card. When you do, you proliferate. The aim of this deck is to take advantage of Yawgmoth's sacrifice ability to lead an aristocrat style of strategy. Having a Sac Outlet, removal, and card draw all in our commander is very strong, and we'll also be making good use of that discard ability as well. One nice thing about building this as an aristocrat style deck is that there's a lot of redundancy in this colour, so the deck will still work very well without the commander, which is always something I'm a fan of. The first thing we're going to look at is some additional sacrifice outlets. As our commander already has this on it, we won't need to run as many, so we're looking between 4 and 6 here, as it gives us a decent chance of seeing another one in the game, which we can play when Yawgmoth gets a bit too expensive to recast. Cards like Ashnod's Altar can also double up as some ramp, and Genesis Chamber can count towards a token maker, so look for some crossover when picking these. Also, free Sac Outlets are always preferred over ones you have to pay for. The next section is our drain effects. We'll want at least 8 of these in total, as they will chip away at our opponent's life totals again and again throughout the game. Most of these will come in the form of effects that drain when a creatures die, but in a deck like this, something like Ayara and Bontu's Monument will also do plenty of work as well. As this is Commander, look for cards that say each opponent rather than target opponent, as in a game of Commander this will do far more damage. Most newer cards will be laid out this way. The next section of the deck is things that we want to die. The standard version of this in an aristocrat style deck is token makers, as one source will give us multiple things to sack, and they will give us plenty of things to feed to our commander and our other sack outlets. Also importantly, they'll repeatedly trigger our drain effects. Look for these kind of cards all up and down the curve. For low drop spells, look for things you can get out early, and then for later in the game, something like a Grave Titan always works great when it's turned sideways. Some other cards that are good to run in this slot are recurable cheap creatures. These are great in the deck, as they can die and come back over and over again. Running cards like these allow you to run more cards which trigger off of non-token creatures dying, which will come up regularly in other sections. One card that's quite unique in this deck is Nest of Scarabs, as this will give us an additional token each time we place a -1/-1 counter on a creature. And remember, this happens whenever we sacrifice a creature with Yawgmoth. There are some more cards that work with that -1/-1 counter ability, is cards with Undying. If one of these creatures has come back with a +1/+1 counter on it, you can sacrifice another creature to Yawgmoth, and then put the -1/-1 counter on one of these creatures. What you're effectively doing is resetting the Undying ability, which means the creature can then die again and come back. If you have 2 creatures with Undying in play, and Yawgmoth, you can go infinite, so do keep this in mind. Moving over to our 8 bits of card draw, we'll want some spells that reward us from sacrificing creatures. Ones that come with the benefit of actually being Sac Outlets themselves will have a bonus application here. So Skull Clamp, Smothering Abomination, Liliana Dreadhorde General, and God Eternal Bontu are good examples of this. On top of these, you can also run some additional bits that don't synergize too much with the deck, but are just consistent, as these will help you draw cards even on an empty board. Moving over to ramp, we want to run at least 8 bits in the deck. We'll start off with the obvious mana rocks. Even though we're a mono-coloured deck, black can be pretty greedy with the amount of coloured mana that it wants to generate, so as such, I would primarily focus on rocks that tap for black. Soaring, however, still has a place because it's good. In a deck like this, Pitiless Plunderer will do a great job of racking up a load of treasure which we can use to ramp us ahead. Yawgmoth's Proliferate ability hasn't come up too much so far, but it has a cool interaction with some mana generators that use things like charge counters, as we can get them into play with 1 counter and then raise them up faster by proliferating them. This will really help late game to generate a ton of extra mana. And we've mentioned this before in mono black decks, but you can also run cards like Cryptghast and Nikana Revenant to double up the amount of black mana that our swamps are creating. In total, we want around 8 bits of interaction, 4 bits of targeted removal, and 4 board wipes. I'd split this so that some of it comes on creatures, something like Murderous Rider or Ravenous Chupacabra, as it means we have more creatures that we can use as fodder for our Sac Outlets. The rest of the interaction can just be the best bits of black removal that you have available to you. There's plenty of options out there, so play what's best for you. Crumbling Ashes is also a nice little include, and I think the repeatable nature of it means that it makes up for the timing restrictions that it imposes. Let's move on to some dedicated win conditions. We've already touched on some ways of winning the game, with our drain effects and some of the Undying creatures, but we'll have space for some other cards which are just there to win the game. Starting off with Necroskitter, we can use Yawgmoth and our targeted removal to steal our opponent's win conditions and then turn them against them. Then we have a classic mono-black win con with Gary. With all the black pips in this deck, we'll be able to take a fair chunk of life from our opponents. We can also play cards like Crick and Bolas's Citadel. These cards will power the deck forward and speed us up towards winning the game. Also, as it's me, I would also recommend running Living Death, a board wipe in a pinch that can bring back all the things we've sacrificed and allow us to do it all over again. And it wouldn't be an aristocrat deck in black without mentioning Dictator of Erebos, Butcher of Malekith, and Grave Pact. These do a tremendous amount of work in a sack-based deck like this and will mean you'll often be keeping the board clear. The downside is that these aren't too much fun for people to play against. Personally, I don't run them anymore, but if you like them, then go ahead. As we're a mono-coloured deck, we can run a decent amount of utility lands. Cabal Stronghold, Cabal Coffers, and Tomb of Yawgmoth are great for those with the cards or with the budget to include the cards, so if you have access to them, then put them in the deck. Outside of that, look for effects that the deck is missing. Some additional recursion, or some graveyard interaction won't go amiss. We recently released a video that goes over budget mana bases. Some of it won't apply to this as it is a mono-color deck, but I would recommend checking out part 2 which goes over some lands and specifically goes over utility lands and how many to include in a deck like this. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking. Let us know what commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on down in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe to see future deck techs on this channel. Thank you very much.